With something like language education, whether you're self taught or you're signing up to join a university program or a private instructional institute, it's really worth asking, what do we all have in common? When you talk about the so called polyglot movement, talk about people encouraging you to study languages, in most cases, to become self taught in languages, to learn a language with nothing but an application to your mobile phone and a few books you've bought off Amazon. What do we have in common? Someone who's learning Chinese, someone who's learning Spanish, someone who has the outrageous idea that they're going to learn 6 languages simultaneously in 1 year and document it on their YouTube channel and get famous. And yes, those 6 languages include Chinese and Spanish and Arabic and Hebrew and Turkish. Yeah. What do we have in common? Now, I've had to ask myself that question in a lot of different language programs I was actually enrolled in as a student. The Cree language is quite unpopular. We haven't seen a single polyglot here on YouTube learning Cree, Ojibwe, Mohawk. There was that one guy, Sielma NYC. He briefly worked on one of the indigenous languages, an Uto Aztec language, I think. I went to a small, unsuccessful college or university, I suppose. Yeah, it has university in the name. So it calls itself university, that mostly exists in order to provide some kind of economic opportunity for, frankly, poor and oppressed indigenous people. No sarcasm when I say that. Okay, this is a language you can't really make any money from studying. You can lose money studying it. Okay, I'm going to study Cree. Cree is in the same language family as Ojibwe. Imagine all the things I thought I would have in common with the other students sitting down with me in the classroom. I assumed the other white people choosing to study this language would have certain kinds of passions, ambitions, and interests in going with me. And then obviously I had assumptions about the indigenous people, like if they were born Cree, certain kind of interest and engagement. One of my first days in the class, it wasn't the very first day, I strike up conversation with this group of 3 white people who always sat together. And, more or less, the question is, why did you choose to study Cree? And they say, oh, they all have really bad grades. And they're trying to get into the X-ray technician program at the university. And they've got to boost their average grade to be high enough to get into being an X-ray technician. And they'd heard that this was a really easy course. You could just memorize the right answers to the test. I think the test was the same every year. Like you could get a photocopy of last year's test, memorize oh, interesting. So I guess you guys aren't here for the same reason I am. Okay, study a language like Pali, language like Sanskrit, language like Chinese, right? The study of the language brings together people with wildly different philosophies, expectations, ambitions, but you are brought together by the study of one language, right? That's one thing you have in common. Now, me and Steve Kaufmann seem to have a lot in common, right? So Steve Kaufmann is either Jewish or half Jewish. I also am either Jewish or half Jewish. It's like theoretical physics. Is it a particle or is it a wave? Okay. Regarded from one perspective, I'm half Jewish, but from another perspective, I'm 100% Jewish. True story. I met a woman once and she told me, well, I'm half Korean, but I'm 100% Jewish. So her perspective was not that she was half Korean, half Jewish. She's half Korean, but she's 100% Jewish. See, it's theoretical physics. I lean towards the particle view of it. Never been a wave guy when it comes to theoretical physics. I think that hasn't come up on the show before. Steve Kaufmann and I, we are both Jewish Canadians who can pass for white. We grew up in this, as far as I know, I've looked at this guy's autobiography to say I read it as a slight exaggeration. Grew up in the same part of Canada, got a university education in politics. My major is political science, right? Actually, probably culturally in terms of interests, we have a lot going. The thing is this. Steve has been studying Arabic for 7 years. I said to my girlfriend the other day, because we have to make a bunch of really, really hard decisions of what we're doing with the next 5 years of our life, the next 50 years of our lives, assuming about 50 years to play with here. I'm in my mid-40s. Maybe we have 50 years to play with her. And it's like, the thing is about Steve Kaufmann, you really can learn Arabic in 7 years. It's not that hard a language. It's like, what about you and I? What if we have no other friends involved? We have no university. If you and I, Melissa and I, boyfriend and girlfriend, if we sit down and get motivated and really hit the books on Arabic, think of where we could be 5 years from now, 7 years from now, whatever number you want to learn. And think about our motivations. Think about why we would do it. And now think about the contrast to Steve Kaufmann, what he's doing on the internet now, what he's been doing his whole life, and many of his competitors, so to speak, in this polyglot demi-monde. Every single one of Steve Kaufmann's videos consists of him patting himself on the back, praising himself for what a wonderful guy he is, what an amazing exemplar he is of language education. And then in his affable way, he says, and you can be too. You can be. Just download this app on your phone. Just follow these 5. Just relax. Just take it easy. Just enjoy yourself. You can just be this wonderful human being like Steve Kaufmann. Why would I study Arabic? Why would you? Can you imagine how different your view of the world is when you can read a newspaper published in Egypt for yourself, when you can hear politics being discussed and debated in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, across a tremendous expanse of the Arabic speaking world? Can you imagine if I were criticizing Hamas? Hamas is a terrorist organization in and around Israel, on the basis of my directly watching what they're saying in their YouTube videos, what they're saying in their blogs, what they're saying in their propaganda messages. Where I'm not just talking in abstract generalizations. I'm saying, look, this month, this week, this is what they said about their terrorist activities, about their political ambitions. And here's how it's being described in the New York Times. Here's how it's being misrepresented in the Western. That's learning a language with a purpose. Okay? And no matter how much of an egomaniac you may be, that process is tremendously humbling. It's perpetually humiliating. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes a native speaker of the language would never learn. The amount you know is always a fragment of what you need to know and want to know. And the difference you can make is always so puny. When I studied the Laotian language, living and working in Laos, and I care about the future of this frankly godforsaken country, I say that as an atheist. In the most atheist sense of the term possible, in the most nihilistic sense of the term possible, please allow me to use the adjective godforsaken. This hopeless country, hopeless and hapless. You care about these people, you care about their future, you care about their destiny. No matter how hard you work, right? The difference you can make is so puny compared to the difference you like to make. And, I hate to tell you this, the whole country of Laos, the population is less than one city in China. Population is less than one city like Tokyo in Japan. It's a very small country. So actually the impact you make relative to the number of people, it's pretty quickly pretty quickly, everyone in the Communist Party of Laos knew my name and so on. You write just a few articles, you publish just a few things, you start making, that guy. Oh, right, Whereas to have that kind of impact in communist China, even Cuba or something, I think is much, much, much. And yeah, long story short, they threatened to kill me and I got kicked out of the country. So yeah, that's when you know you're making a difference. When people try to kill you and kick you out of the country, it's a good sign. Okay, Steve, it's not too late. Steve, you want to start changing? Steve Kaufmann, let's see that humanitarian instinct in you, Steve. Your kids are fully grown. Take some risks. Try to make a difference. Okay. My point is this. If I were to struggle to learn Arabic within 5 years, then 7 years, which is attainable. Arabic is not as hard as Japanese. It's not as hard as Chinese. It's not as hard as Cree, Ojibwe. There are harder languages. Okay. I would be doing it for a purpose. And no matter how much of an egomaniac I may be, debatable, that purpose is so much grander. It's so much greater. It dwarfs me, right? That there's a sense in which I am really going to be humble. And I'm going to be humbled by the process of learning the language and the sense of kind of responsibility you take on. Now, again, I'll just be real with you. My whole engagement with Cree and Ojibwe as languages, to say that's humbling is an understatement. You want to help these people? The political situation. Not Steve Kaufmann comes from the same place I come from. As I said, same background. Again, he's not interested in this. But it is a really terrible political and economic situation they're in. Although, interestingly, within one of the richest countries in the world, unlike Laos, which was one of the poorest countries in the world when I was there. Laos, the official name of the country is the Lao People's Democratic Republic. Officially, there's no S on the end of Laos. Although I noticed at the United Nations, the brass plate still always has the S. So I don't know. They haven't put their foot down. They haven't changed their name at the UN. But their officially styled name is just Lao. They just want to keep it down to one syllable, no S. I can't remember ever being on an ego trip because I was studying Korean and Ojibwe. Like all these guys on YouTube are. They're on an ego trip with every fucking language. It was such a burden. It was just, I'm just honest, it was so horrible to wake up every day and memorize the names of the months of the year and the names of the days of the week in a language that nobody speaks anymore, in a language that is dying because it was conquered by not one, not two, but like 3 different European genocidal powers in succession. And none of them gave a damn about preserving this language. They only wanted to convert these people to Christianity and force them to speak variously French, English, etc. And you're working so hard on this language and you know how little is your reward. It absolutely never occurred to me to come on YouTube or come on Facebook. At that time, Facebook was kind of popping and kind of preach and preen and pose and brag about how wonderful it is that I'm learning Korean and Ojibwe. If I'd done that, I probably would have gotten some most clicks. Probably some, oh, look at this nice young white Jewish man who's studying. Oh, isn't that great? Oh, I wish my grandson was more like you. Thumbs up. Probably I could cater to a certain demographic. And I'd have to make the same kind of, upbeat, deeply dishonest, encouraging videos, that these other polyglot YouTubers make. Maybe, can you imagine someone who gets sucked in that way and they end up doing that? Oh, I'm learning 6 languages at the same time this year. Dude, if one of those 6 languages is Chinese, I mean, come on. It's just ridiculous. And look, so let's just jump back to Steve real quick. I'm going to read you what I wrote to Steve. I'm going to read his replies to me. Steve, he sometimes vaguely says that he learned Chinese in 1 year. If you actually read his autobiographical description, it took up certainly more than 1 year. It took up several years. But I understand his most intense period of studying the language was 1 year. Okay. He then married a Chinese-speaking woman. It's more of a story. Okay. But if you look at that 1 year, Steve wasn't studying anything else. He wasn't doing anything else. He was getting full-time university-style instruction in Chinese using the Yale method and the Yale textbooks. For some reason, he's not on YouTube selling photocopies or PDFs of the Yale textbooks. He's not encouraging you to learn Chinese the way he did, right? For some reason, Steve wasn't learning 6 languages at the same time during that 1 year when he studied Chinese most necessarily. Think about what a different world it would be if Steve were delivering that message. If he was saying to people, guess what? There are no shortcuts. There's no magical app on your phone that's going to help you. There's no way around it. If you want to learn the Chinese language, you've got to save up some money, quit your job, study full-time, and work on nothing else for 1 year. You can't learn Chinese and Turkish at the same time. You can't learn Chinese and German and Spanish. No. You know what? If you really want to hit the books and study Chinese, you will barely have time to go to the bathroom. And he currently encourages people, relax, enjoy yourself, watch cartoons, read comic books, do what you enjoy. Like, imagine if he was saying the opposite, where we're saying to you really honestly, look, guys, you want to get this done in 1 year? You want to get as much done as possible in 1 year? It's gonna be pain. It's gonna be pain and sorrow of a kind that you can't imagine, but I can. And so I'm familiar with these books. Just hold up those Yale University Chinese language textbooks, and then hold up this fucking app on the phone. And I've seen his description of the teachers and tutors he had for Chinese, and the hours and hours of face-to-face, one teacher, one student, not large classroom, not 45 students in 45 seats with one professor, not 300 students with one professor. No, one student, one professor, face-to-face language drills for all these hours. Okay, now compare that to sitting on the toilet with Duolingo or another phone app, and you tell me how effective that's going to be for a language at the level of difficulty of Chinese. Now, okay, I'm gonna read what I said to him. I'm gonna read what he says back to me. But guys, when I ask the question, has this been proven through empirical methods? That doesn't mean that I'm telling you I already know the answer. It just means I'm pointing out to Steve, you don't know the answer. And one of the reasons you don't know the answer is you're not even asking the question. You're not doing the research, not doing the testing. I'll ask you open-ended question. We're having lots of really intelligent comments from the audience, I noticed. Lots of people in my audience are on my level intellectually. That's what I really love about this YouTube channel. There were just so many hundreds and thousands of people who can talk to me as equals about history, politics, and study of languages. It's really great. It's really wonderful to be able to turn on my computer and feel like I'm in the company of my equals. Yeah, like Steve Kaufmann here. Why do you think it is? Why do you think it is Steve hasn't had me on his show? For some reason, he felt comfortable having Lao Shu 55,000 on his show. You like that? Oh, yeah. For some reason, he's really happy doing these kind of phony dialogues with other phony people who have no formal education in linguistics. Oh, right. Sorry. Here's another digression. 2 different things I had in mind to mention in this video. I work with no notes and others written down. But, as opposed to talking to people who really have experience working with teacher to student face-to-face and seeing what the real obstacles are students struggle with and how they overcome. I had a student who was born deaf, and she had surgery at some point that then allowed her to hear, but she had grown up deaf, right? So I didn't work with her for that many hours. I think we met 3 times, face-to-face, one teacher, one student. So let's say it was 3 hours and 3 meetings, if I'm misremembering this wrong. And then also, I did that completely unpaid on a volunteer basis. Then also, I worked just in the classroom as a normal student. So, but I noticed she needed help, and I said, "Look, I can meet with you and do this." Wow. When you hold someone's hand and help them through phonology, through enunciation, through exactly the thing someone born deaf struggles with. It was educational for her. It was educational for me. I would compare this to being a personal trainer at the gym. It's one thing to say you understand exercise in abstract, in theory, and principle. It's one thing to say you even understand motivation, right? Have you actually held someone's hand when they struggled to get in shape, to lose body fat, to gain muscle mass, both? And, of course, when you have that experience, you realize some people are so gifted and so disciplined, you barely need to help them at all. You just put them on the bench and give them a list of exercises and they go and they get the results. And it's great. And there are some people where you have to work so hard. And what you have to work hard on, what you have to help them with, it's not the same for each person. Learning a language is not one talent. Okay. From the first time I met Melissa, I've been spending my time around a lot of people struggling to learn Chinese. And I really noticed that she had particular talents that were important for Chinese that I was going to say almost all of the other white people lacked, but actually all of them lacked it. I don't even remember a single white student learning Chinese who had these talents. I'm saying white, but obviously I just mean non-China. They could be black people, they could be Hispanic people, but these were predominantly white people learning Chinese. Where some of the white students, you'd explain to them the difference between, s and si. It's not the same sound in Chinese. No. S is not si, right? And then 6 months later, they're still making the mistake, both in reading and thinking. And it's on a comprehensional level, these two syllables are one and the same in their mind. You can see how it comes out. And if someone says, look, come on, we worked on this 6 months ago. And say, oh, yeah, right. So is not see. Right. Melissa right away could immediately, you didn't have to tell her, she could grasp these very short sounds and short syllables. She could grasp visually the significance of the character, and her mind held on to those details really without coaching, without repetition and force. And I really noticed this. Now, I'm just going to tell you something. Not all languages are like Chinese. Modern Greek has these long words of many, many syllables. And depending on the position of the sentence, some of those sound a little different or change, right? There's an issue of intonation and emphasis and how to sound natural. And the pronunciation of the word is very different from the way it's spelled. Modern Spanish and modern Greek both struggle with this a lot, in my opinion. But I think modern Greek is even worse, frankly. There's this gap, with Spanish, there's a gap between Latin and modern Spanish. With Greek, there's this gap between ancient Greek and modern Greek. So the writing system only very loosely, corresponds to the real phonetics. And you just have to keep straight in your mind these long, complex words, series of syllables. Sometimes you get a cluster of consonants, sometimes consonant vowel. And you can't put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, this kind of thing. That's different. That's a different skill set. And I never really evaluated Melissa that way. But I will just say, in general, the type of person who has a mind that really quickly grasps, s, and can remember s, and can remember this visual symbol, that's not the same skill set that would make you naturally gifted in some other language. I can talk about Korean and Ojibwe. I can talk about Pali and Sanskrit. I can talk about ancient and modern Greek. So I'm just saying, all right, there is no reason to think that talent in language learning is one thing. And if you have the experience of holding someone's hand and helping them learn a language again and again and again, you get familiar with the ways in which different people struggle to overcome different obstacles, and different people are gifted and some things are effortless for some people in different ways. And I dislike the extent to which Steve's act just consists of self-congratulation. I dislike the extent to which it consists of boosterism, of encouragement for people, encouraging people basically to ruin their lives. That's my opinion. I could say more about that. I think the advice he's giving is actually dangerous and destructive to people. But beyond that, it is like hearing someone give exercise advice who both totally lacks book learning on exercise, fitness, sports nutrition, etc., and someone who lacks that practical hands-on experience. Now, I just want to add, I'm skeptical about these things. I'm nihilistic with these things. It's possible for someone who has the book learning, someone who has a PhD in linguistics, or for someone who has a PhD in sports medicine, kinesiology, exercise, it's possible for that person to give worse advice than someone who has no formal training at all. I've met some remarkably stupid people, PhDs. It is possible. I'm not setting up a simple cause and effect relation. However, in Steve's case, we're dealing with someone who has no formal education of that kind, none of the hands-on experience of that kind, and who is also giving terrible advice. All right. So I'll first read you my messages, then we'll have Steve's reply. I say, Steve, you never use empirical measurements of outcomes. You never even admit the possibility that social science research can measure outcomes for contrasting methods of language education. I'll just pause there and give you an example. So again, when I'm saying he lacks this, it doesn't mean I have all the answers, but at least I know to ask the right questions. What is a better way to learn Latin? Should you learn Latin through the modern Italian pronunciation of the language, which is to some extent a mispronunciation of the language, or should you learn Latin trying to reconstruct and adhere to the Ciceroist, ideal, how we think it was pronounced in the time of Cicero, whose name was pronounced more like Kikaru. It's a good example. Cicero, Kikaru. Okay. No, let's put this in Steve's term. In Steve's terms, which one is more enjoyable? Which one is more effective? Which one has better outcomes? I don't know the answer to that question. That's it. But I know how to ask the question. I know how to do the research and look into it, right? It's a really interesting question. If you learn the modern Italian pronunciation, you can sing in Latin in a church group. Okay, not a lot of opportunities to speak the Latin language, right? So that's the difference, right? We could get into parallel things with a language like Cree and Ojibwe, language like Pali and Sanskrit, right? With Pali and Sanskrit, it's very closely parallel. Is this the form of language you can use in chanting, in ritual uses of the language that exists today? Okay, well, if you really want to learn Cree, I know that the James Bay Cree actually have Catholic church ceremonies in the Cree language. So you can learn that dialect, go to that community. If you have the intestinal fortitude to attend church in Cree and read the Bible in Cree, there's not a lot of literature written in the Cree language, right? We gotta make hard choices like this. But yeah, again, in my saying, Steve, you don't know the answer. I am not asserting that I know the answer for all languages. Certainly, Latin is a really good example. But at least I know how to ask the question. And that's why I'm not going to give you misleading advice that's going to ruin your life. Okay. Okay. Social science research can measure outcomes for contrasting methods of language education. One group of new recruits into the US military can study using one method, and then that can be contrasted to another, both starting at the same level of knowledge, studying over the same period of time, etc. So the military is an especially good example because you actually have control over where these guys sleep, how much they eat, how many hours they study for. How many hours a day they're doing physical exercise versus. So it's a very controlled environment for evaluating effectiveness of different language teaching methods. And the US military is very interested in what is effective in teaching a language. And that's one of the best places you can find this kind of evidence. So, by the way, not only the American military, the Belgian military, all kinds of other military organizations are doing this. Steve, not interested for some reason. Now, hey, you know who else is not interested? Pretty much every university in the Western world. For some reason, Cambridge University, Oxford University, Harvard, for some reason, University of Toronto or something, nobody's really interested in evaluating how little Chinese their students are like. Oh yeah, people pay $100,000 to come here and study Chinese, so it must be good. Well, do you want to evaluate how much they've actually learned after 4 years or however many years it's taking your courses? It's frightening how little they learn and whether or not that's a good use of $100,000. But the military has to ask those tough questions because they don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars. They don't have 4 years. They need you to learn these languages fast and effectively. So that's one milieu in which you do get social science research being done. Okay? So I then continue. I say, Steve, your own outcomes after so many years with the learning of Chinese are terrible. You want language learning to be an endless hobby for your own entertainment and self-indulgence. but neither a university nor a military organization will agree with your theories of education. Theories that are completely unfounded, all that. Theories that are completely untested, unverified, no connection to empirical reality or measurements. And I then say, enjoy having 20,000 people, more than 20,000 people, agreeing with you when you tell them what they want to hear. Thousands will applaud you because you're telling them that this isn't hard work when really it is. And I also pointed out, just a separate comment, I say, right. You conclude with, quote, if you follow my method, you'll enjoy the process more and be more successful. Right, as if you've ever measured either one of those outcomes for even a single student, let alone 100 or 1,000. Do people enjoy your method more? Do they actually get higher levels of measurable language ability as a result of this more enjoyable method? On some level, you're aware that what you're preaching here is closer to religion than science. So I've got 2 replies from him. I'm going to read the next one. The most important thing you have to capture in your research into this are dropouts. You have to capture and study attrition. So use the metaphor of a gym trainer again. If you have a gym trainer who says, oh, yeah, 100% of my clients lose weight and gain muscle mass. And you say, oh, well, what about this guy, Henry? Like, oh, no. I couldn't work with Henry. I dropped him as a client. After 2 weeks, I didn't get along with him. He didn't get along with me. So I dropped him. He doesn't count. He counts. You have to go and find Henry and study Henry and find out why he dropped out, why it didn't work for him, whether it was 2 weeks or 2 months. The dropout rate is crucial, right? The dropout rate for the military is crucial. The dropout rate for university is crucial. That has to be part of the picture. You can't say, oh, yeah, it's successful 100% of the time when I get to exclude all the examples of failure, right? So with language learning methods, this is why you have to have really rigorous social science research. You can't just rely on self-reporting from hucksters promoting how effective their own methods are. So there's a quote. Someone in the audience has said, "quote Some Canadian colleges have started accepting students who have passed the Duolingo test. These colleges are at a very low level, and unfortunately, the Duolingo test enables the lives of Steve Kaufmann." Yeah, sure. I think there's a real question, though. Who should universities be helping? And I think in a perfect world, universities would help people who are at a very, very low level and have done nothing but some Duolingo lessons. And they would also be able to help people like me. But universities can neither be entirely elite and elitist, nor can they be entirely populist and catering to the lowest common denominator. So that's a very tough question. Now, let me repeat that for the military. The military needs to train. So Chinese is a language. You need to train people at an elite level to be able to deal with coded military documents, to read something that's really important about the military, about politics, and understand it and listen to a secretly recorded conversation. But you also need to deal with some frankly, very stupid people at a very low level who are just getting started. So I don't have one answer to that question. I have 10 different answers. Okay. I think I finished what I was saying earlier. Steve's reply to me. He wrote back and said, 3 questions. 1, are you a native Chinese speaker? What are your credentials to judge my Chinese? This is like the first of a list. Gee, Steve. Yes, what are my credentials? And what are your credentials in Arabic again? And what are your credentials in Polish? And what are your credentials in French or indeed Chinese itself? Okay, good. I did answer his question. You guys will be happy to know I didn't leave this unanswered, And he asks, 2, how many years have I spent studying Chinese according to you? So he never answers this. He never gives the answer how many years. He asked me, how many years do I think he spent studying Chinese? Well, I read your autobiography, Steve. So I know what you tell people. I also know that both you and your son have repeatedly rewritten the Wikipedia article. There was a big controversy about that to promote you and your language app and to say what an amazing language scholar you are. So I've read what the Wikipedia article says. And your Wikipedia article links to this PDF of your autobiography talking about your amazing life studying languages. So I know what you have to say about it, Steve. I know your narrative of how you learn Chinese. And then he asks, 3, how many languages do you speak? All right, so I'll give you my reply, and then you'll get his reply to my reply. Steve, you wrote to me demanding to know how it is that I know Chinese so well that I can judge your level of ability in it. In reply, I suggested that you Google my video titled, quote, I learned Chinese in 6 months, but you can't, close quote, because you'll find that it's honest about precisely the things you've made a career out of being dishonest about. You also wanted to know how many languages I've studied. Unlike yourself, there is very palpable evidence of the depth and breadth of my experience learning languages from totally different families, different language families, including Chinese, Cree, and Pali. So Cree is Algonquian, Pali is an ancient Indian language related to Sanskrit. That is not remotely a complete list of the languages I've studied. Tragically, I've studied many, many more languages than that. I just didn't do what Steve said of motivations. Next sentence. But I am not living a lie, Steve. I know the limits of my own language ability, and I know yours as well. You have studied Chinese for more than 50 years, and you married a Chinese woman. Your level of accomplishment in the language is, in a word, abominable. You are proving that your own methods do not get results with the languages you've studied more recently. For example, Arabic and Polish. Your failure with Chinese is an important, empirically real example. You need to re-examine the deepest assumptions built into your language learning advice. They are falsifiable and they are false. So if you guys don't know, falsifiable means you have a scientific hypothesis that can be tested and probably should be tested. All right. So if someone tells you that aspirin will help you with lower back pain, that's falsifiable. That doesn't mean it's false. That could be tested. What are the effects of aspirin on lower back pain? I honestly don't know. But that's a claim that can be falsified, right? And the reason why I kept using the word empirical again and again in my first comment is that's the point I'm trying to get across. These claims about what is effective in language learning, language teaching, study, et cetera, we have to think about this as a matter of science, not a matter of faith, not a kind of religion, right? Same thing can be said about giving advice about weight loss, gaining muscle, working out at the gym, right? Are you making falsifiable claims? Then can we test them? Can we look at the results? And again, frankly, if you're talking about physical fitness, maybe the U.S. military is also interested in this. They also have to take people who are out of shape and get them into good physical shape. I mean, there's also research on that in the military for obvious pragmatic reasons. So here is Steve's reply. Quote, for the benefit of people who follow this channel, I only value comments about my level in a language from native speakers. Next sentence. I learned Chinese over 50 years ago. And since that time, have spent most of my language learning time on other languages. My wife and I speak English to each other, except if we are with Chinese people, which doesn't happen often. Yes, my Polish after 5 months is not great, but I enjoy reading and listening in Polish. I am finding Arabic difficult. So Arabic, according to him, 7 years. Probably haven't improved much since I went to Morocco 5 years ago. If I focused on it, I would have done better. That's falsifiable. But I enjoy it. Now, this is the most puzzling statement of all. People can take my advice or leave it. However, many tell me that my message and advice gave them confidence and enabled them to learn languages when previously they couldn't. So, Steve, I had an enemy here on the internet who told people that they could eat 5,000 calories a day and lose weight, that they could become slim and muscular while eating 5,000 calories a day. He also said you could eat an unlimited amount of calories a day. This is a direct quotation from this man in his health advice, health and workout advice. He said you could eat until you spew. You could keep forcing in the calories until you spew, as long as you buy his book, follow his directions, follow his advice. As you can imagine, there are details there. And I made videos criticizing this, and quite a controversy ensued. I think more than 1 million people saw the videos that spun into that controversy. I mean, there was a period where like each video had 100,000 views, and they were on all different channels, and many of those videos are not deleted. So at any rate, a minimum of 500,000 people were witnesses to that controversy. But those are claims that are falsifiable. In this instance, of course, they're false. But what could that man, this YouTuber who made a lot of money and got famous, what could he claim to substantiate his own advice? He doesn't have a PhD. You'll be shocked to learn. He doesn't have a university degree in nutrition, dietetics, any kind of science. He doesn't have experience working as a personal trainer. He doesn't have experience as a weight loss coach, helping people who are morbidly obese in hospital. No. What he could do was point to himself. He could point to his own body. He could take off his shirt on camera and say, look at this body. If you want to have a body like this, you can follow these directions, this advice, this by his book, right? And he was guaranteeing to you, you could eat 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 calories a day and lose weight and have a body like his. Now, I know Steve actually puts a lot of effort into diet and exercise, and it shows. He's an old man. He's in good shape, and he has a workout routine at the gym. He takes diet and exercise very seriously. So he may really do this. Steve, how would you feel if someone like that said the same thing you've just said? Well, people can take my advice or leave it. However, many tell me that my message and advice gave them confidence and enabled them to achieve their goals when they couldn't. Now, this is exactly the kind of justification I dealt with in the health and fitness world. What does it mean to say people can take my advice or leave it when your entire product, the entire purpose of your channel is promoting and selling this same advice? Here's the difference, Steve. You can't point to yourself as a success story. You can't point to yourself as a positive example. The empirical method in your case does not even have one specimen to back it up. The level you achieved in Arabic in 7 years is deplorable. It's awful. It's terrible. And you are not willing to treat that as evidence to go back and re-examine the assumptions that are built into your system, right? And to figure out which ones are false, or which ones at least are weak and need to be tested. You dogmatically continue to believe in and preach this method that doesn't work, not even for you. Now, really briefly, I used to have a friend, a female friend, and she had a health condition that gave her abnormally high testosterone levels for a woman. So she'd work out at the gym. She had these huge shoulders. She'd be really lean. She had this very impressive physique, right? Then she had surgery that fixed the testosterone condition. Her physique has never been impressive that way again. If you ate exactly the same diet she ate, as a woman, let's say, if any woman watching her channel or looking at her Instagram, you could eat exactly the same diet, you could do exactly the same exercise at the gym with the same amount of weight, and you would not get the same results. She was an extraordinary person, biologically an abnormal person, right? And she actually had it corrected as hell. She ultimately had a surgery that gave her normal testosterone levels for a woman. And then this advantage disappeared. So in her case, she wasn't taking steroids, right? She had an extraordinary condition. All right. Now, let's say, so I don't know any real example of this, but in terms of just weight loss, there are people who have conditions where they don't absorb food properly in their digestion. They actually have an absorption problem. And they could actually say that they could eat 3,000 calories a day for and still be lean. There are some people with extraordinary health conditions that way. If you imitate their diet, you won't get the same results. Now, one of the causes of that, I've read about this, is people who were drug addicts and who destroyed the ability of their digestive tract to properly process food during years of drug addiction. There are certain kinds of diseases, things that can damage your ability to ingest food, absorb it and convert it and get into your bloodstream and then gain fat, what have you. Okay, nobody would envy those people. But if, I've never heard of this on YouTube, but if there was someone like that on YouTube saying, hey, here's all the food I eat, you can eat the same food and lose weight, right? That would be bad advice. But most of the time on YouTube, this kind of bad advice, it isn't someone with a health condition. It isn't someone with an extraordinary talent, an unusual biological advantage. It isn't someone who's a genius, a prodigy, a freak of nature. It's someone who just lies. It's someone who films the food and says this is the food they eat when it is not. They are eating something else. I know of an example of someone who even faked weighing himself on a scale. I know of someone who faked the number of kilometers and the speed he was doing on his bicycle. You can fake this, and it was being uploaded to the internet. Like, a lot of these things can be fake. They can be misrepresented. Okay, so there's fraud of various kinds. Some people do it for money, some for sex, some for fame, some for notoriety, some as an end in itself. Okay, and Steve, I want you to take a moment and agree with me with this. Nothing could be easier than misleading the internet about your level of ability in a foreign language. Okay, Steve, I don't think you're dumb. I think you've made some bad choices in your life. But I think you know when you watch these videos and the way that they're edited, whether they're the videos of Xiaoma in the Lower East Side of New York speaking Chinese, I myself have spoken Chinese in the Lower East Side of New York, Lower East Side of Manhattan, I should say. You know, I've done that. I wasn't showing off, just trying to, anyway, buying food. So when I have been a white guy, seemingly white guy, walking around speaking Chinese in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I don't get reactions like Xiaoma does in those videos. You know, going, another white guy who speaks Chinese. It's no interest. Nobody is surprised or impressed. Just did things like asking where the soy milk is when I walked into a grocery store. Things like, it's normal. It's no big deal. Okay, Steve, I think you know when you listen to Lao Shu 55,000 and his phrase book knowledge of these languages, where he's just memorized phrase book, you know what's wrong with these videos. You know what's wrong with the Skype style dogs. I think you know the extent to which this whole polyglot internet phenomenon is predicated on a kind of fraud, just as dangerous and just as deceptive as weight loss fraud, muscle gaining fraud, fad diet fraud. I think you know the danger. I think you know what's going on. I think what you refuse to do is look in the mirror and see the extent to which you are participating in that subculture yourself. You keep patting yourself on the back that you're such a wonderful person. Okay, Steve, when I studied the Laotian language, it wasn't so that I could come here on YouTube and flex and show off for a bunch of teenagers. And it wasn't to sell an app. And it wasn't to get laid at a polyglot conference. I was actually trying to help people. I was actually trying to make the world a better place. And it's incredibly humbling. It's incredibly demoralizing. It's incredibly exhausting and denigrating to really go out and try to do humanitarian work. What about you, Steve? Your kids are fully grown and moved out of the house. You have plenty of money. You don't need the money, Steve. We both know that. You're in a position to give back. You're in a much better position to do humanitarian work than I was when I'd finished my BA in university, right? You know what, Steve? You could be in Laos right now. You could be in Cambodia right now. You could be in Myanmar right now. You could be in Libya right now. You could be in Syria right now. But even Even if you were going to stay within the United States and Canada, you know there are places where you could be making a positive difference right now. There are people who need help, and you have the ability to help them, right? Whether you're thinking of the Cree and Ojibwe, whether you think of going to El Paso, Texas, whatever it is. Steve, when this is all over, what do you want to be able to brag about? Because you have been bragging for all these years that you're a linguistic genius who learned Chinese in just 1 year. So pitiable. And the truth is, you're a man who has not learned Chinese in 50 years. You're a man who has failed to learn Chinese in 50 years, despite your involvement with, in your terms, the Canadian Diplomatic Corps. Perhaps you were really working in import-export. Perhaps you were really working in trade promotion. But you say diplomacy, despite your access to elite-level university education in Hong Kong, despite your falling in love with and marrying a Chinese woman, you failed for 50 years. And you know what, Steve? There's something valuable you can learn from that failure. There's something valuable you can share with us all, and there is a positive difference you can make in the world. But what you're doing right now, this ain't it.